what's up, everyone? We are live with another esteemed guest here. So, welcome everybody. This is Francesco here, leading developer relation at Consensus, but I'm also contributing to a DAO called Mother DAO. So, we're trying to build this kind of like main agent, kind of like infra, open source, kind of like attestation. But here we're speaking, and I think people are used to kind of like this live stream right now, but we're speaking with very interesting kind of like agent builders and ecosystem leaders. And today we're sit down here with Ethan from Borderless Ventures. And actually, Ethan, it's an honor to have you here. You want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Francisco. Most people probably have seen me just because I speak at a ton of conferences. I think I did 84 of them last year, so that's a little nuts. Most of it's actually in general tech, a lot of AI, but like things like Web Summit or big events like that are not necessarily crypto or Web3, but then other stuff that is some of the crypto events and things like that, especially in Western, Central, Eastern Europe, the events that are here, a little bit in Southeast Asia. Work-wise, Borderless Ventures is a family office and a syndicate, so a kind of a large grouped investment kind of community based in Tallinn, in Estonia, and in Singapore. I've been involved in the crypto space, since this is probably a fairly crypto audience, since 2015. Which for me seems late, but for most people I think seems early. And so it's been a fun ride for a while with all of these things. But a lot of what really drew me to that space was democratization of finance, democratization of opportunity for people to participate in other asset classes, other financial opportunities, other ways to have a piece of the larger pie that's generally reserved for much larger capital or other things. And so that actually will take us into the AI discussion, because I think a lot of the AI stuff's actually going to do what we wanted crypto to do for a lot of those things. We can come back to that. But because of that, I have a couple things. Like now I have the Creator Economy Institute, which so I speak a lot on generative and agentic AI and low code development, the creator economy model, which all of those things packaged together is the subject of a book that's coming out this fall called the AI Solopreneur Economy, which is basically all about how either individuals or small team entrepreneurship is really changing dramatically in how either non-tech entrepreneurs or non-entrepreneurial devs can now build really outscaled companies and activities using a lot less human resources than before. And so you've got 1-person, 3-person, 10-person teams being able to accomplish what takes 10, 50, 100, 200 people, maybe, like it's crazy what's being done in this space. And so I'm very bullish on that. And so it all kind of ties together, the crypto Web3 piece of that, the low code idea, the agentic and generative AI. So all that kind of comes together. So it's what I speak on at events. It's a lot of what the consulting and other things I do. And then on the investment side as well, that's kind of the focus. So that's all those
It's
things
really
kind of
cool.
wrapped together. It depends on when you meet me, which hat I'm wearing, but all those things really are part of the same thing.
Look, it's very interesting also the fact that you have this kind of like Web2 exposure, because obviously like agentic AI has been around and has been kind of like battle tested in Web2 a lot, especially when people are starting to speak about kind of like workflow optimization. So I think like this kind of like view of having like the Ethan also Web2 and Web3, I think is giving a lot of like unbiased opinion. And he's also like kind of like seeing, okay, this is something that we kind of like could learn from the kind of like the Web2 workflow and Web2 builders. And also the fact that on the investment side, obviously you probably like seeing a bunch of kind of like agents. So a little bit like going back here, like so what kind of like drive you through building an agent? What you guys are actually building inside Borderless Ventures? I think you mentioned like you kind of actually building an agent. Actually, it's very cool to see a family office slash kind of like a Borderless Venture doing that. So congrats on that first. But
Yeah.
what you guys are building? Yeah.
Uh, so there is a little bit of stuff on the investment side that I've played around with. Most of actually the agentic stuff is just running my own existence. I have a chief of staff in Telegram. Her name is Mrs. Landingham, which is a West Wing reference. And every day she sends me my to-do list, which is in Notion. and I can send her new to-dos that she adds to Notion. She sends me all kinds of alerts for other things that go on in my life that I'm supposed to pay attention to, so that my ADHD brain will actually get stuff done. And so she stays on top of everything I'm supposed to do, and she's a bot. And that is actually innate in and a workflow that
Nice.
processes all kinds of things. I've got other agents that basically read all of my newsletters and summarize all of the trending topics for me, so I know what's going on, so I don't have to read everything. But I have a dashboard that I've built that then allows me to click through on any of those subjects and actually
Hmm.
see the relevant pieces of the email from the newsletter. So then it allows me to subscribe to a couple of hundred newsletters and be
Hmm.
able to actually absorb more info than before when I just archived all that shit and didn't pay any attention to it. Um, and so that's one. I've got others that help with content creation.
Hmm.
Again, basically kind of keeping an eye out on what people are talking about and other things. There's several other things for administration around just several companies, and so I'm helping organize accounting and administrative tasks and other things that could have been sent or were previously sent maybe to executive assistants or real
Nice.
people to maybe do stuff. All of that stuff can now actually be done primarily through agents. And the mixture of that technologically are platforms like N8N, like Nathan, or actually I also have a dedicated server that I built a bunch of stuff in Python that runs on its own too, depending on what that stuff is. My background way back was electrical and computer engineering, so I would
Nice.
not call myself a dev, but I'm dangerous in front of some code, so I can hack things together and make it all work. Which is again the magic of a lot of this is being able to understand it enough really helps bring out the power of it without
Yes.
having to be a dev in terms of actual daily experience and work.
Hmm.
So there's just a lot of different stuff there. It's mostly around looking at all the repetitive tasks in
Hmm.
life and deciding, well, I'm just going to make that a workflow. And so there's just a whole bunch of those. I was last night I was putting one together that just basically all the things I used to have to go through and manually backup out there on the web.
Hmm.
I built a workflow that just goes and does all that. And
Crazy. Yeah.
so just it's all about saving time and about having uh, efficiencies there, but also just the learnings of it by building some of that stuff. Whether it actually is super necessary, it teaches me more about what the things can do.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so there's a ton of that. I run probably at least one deep research report a day on either ChatGPT, well, actually, usually both ChatGPT and Gemini,
Hmm. Hmm.
which usually spits out 30, 40, 50 pages on some random topic I wanted to know more about. And that's also a great thing that lets me absorb a ton more
Yes.
deeper info every day. That is really my job, is learning things and being able to explain them to others or stay up to date on what's happening. As all this speeds up, it's so much harder to keep track, and there's just too much news or too many new things or too much stuff. So having somebody filter that and kind of group it together is one of the main purposes for me of agents. But it's really just about taking everything admin, everything that's in my life that needs um,
Yeah, like
optimized or removed from
optimization,
my
right?
existence and giving it to
Nice.
agents.
Nice. It's very, I mean, it's very cool. I mean, this live stream is all about, how to actually practically use AI as a solo entrepreneur. I think first you can actually like build and work stream specific kind of like verticals of your, let's say, agentic life. Like maybe let's dive a little bit like more specifically, right? Where are kind of like in terms of like priority. So for people actually to learn, what are kind of like the main verticals that you are optimizing kind of like right now? You mentioned kind of this reporting, the morning reports. And is there also something, are you actually building the agent actually like that is actually much more than the workflow itself, like an innate workflow is actually something that has some kind of like, agent thinking behind it? Or let's kind of like granularly divide this couple of like things.
Well, most of those, not all of those workflows need to send anything out to an LLM to have any
Hmm.
generative work done. But definitely the stuff that has to summarize things, the stuff that has to have any um, kind of reflection on what to think
Hmm.
about. then that
Hmm.
stuff does have that involved. And so any of the administrative things that involve that do. A lot of the stuff is, so the reality is a lot of agentic workflows are basically just Zapier from 10 years
Yes.
ago. And
Yes.
they don't necessarily have to be more than that if there's no need for generative capabilities, because you're not really analyzing or summarizing or creating new content based on that. The difference is, however, though, is because of the newer version of a lot of the agentic tools, or even if you look at things like Claude with MCP, or if we look at all these other tools that are out there, that now the libraries allow us to do a lot more either scraping or using the web as an agent without the websites needing to know that we're not a human. That stuff is so much more efficient now, to where we can, even if a lot of this is similar to what we could do with Zapier from the beginning, or if
Hmm.
this then that, or any of those platforms, the tools now are a lot more powerful for us to basically automate everything that we connect to digitally. So I think that's the first piece of it, is a lot of the workflows are not necessarily AI, because they don't have generative stuff thrown in there, and the nodes are not really doing any thinking. But to be fair, a lot of the stuff that's behind those is powered by AI, because it's allowing them to do what they do better, even if you're not actually doing generative. But then move that forward to the second piece, which is any of the stuff that has to analyze, like all the emails, for example, all the newsletters that come in, any kind of summaries. I can also ask it to write content based on any of those. Any of
Hmm.
that kind of stuff is definitely generative.
Nice.
Um, the Yeah, it for me. That's primarily it. Is it's there's the If there's a lot of stuff to analyze or think through, then generative might come into it. But a lot of it's just workflow processing. I have
Nice.
another one we can talk about, which basically looks at meme coins and NFTs all day, and tells me when there's something interesting and sends me a Telegram post. And that's another whole workflow that's built that has a little bit of generative in it, because it's taking some information and thinking through it, but most of
Hmm.
it is really just using the APIs or the accessible information for different platforms, finding out what's trending, finding the information of those trending meme coins or NFTs in terms of uh, uh, transactions, volume, total holders, all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff, to then kind of come up with a score as to whether or not that's something that would be interesting to put some money into.
Hmm. Hmm. Nice.
That is
So the DeFi
primarily,
agent.
again,
Yeah.
90% non-AI, but
Mm.
there is a little bit in there where it has to think about it. But still, the reality is, all those non-AI tools behind the scenes, potentially, the platforms are using AI to do what they do. So it is still something that has come vastly forward
Mhm.
versus the Zapier version of just connecting things.
No, it makes sense. I think it's like not just a connection. I think also like really leveraging some of those critical thinking steps, and also like the inputs, the active inputs they're giving to you. I think it's also worth it. And I mean, we have a bunch of also like other Asian kind of like builders hearing us. I wanted to ask you it. And so, what like you approach? I mean, you have been around for quite a while. Like, what are kind of like the main challenges that you faced building? Those agent and kind of like workflow automations. I think like if I have no idea, not about like oh how to start an N8, but in general, like if I want to build an agent from scratch, there are stuff like Eliza, there is different kind of frameworks. But what are kind of the challenges or lesson learned that you can share to also like other builders here that want to automatize and build
Mm.
their kind of like solo entrepreneur kind of like path here with agents?
Well, I think, well, there's a whole lot to unpack there. That's great stuff. Well, I think if we're looking, there's two paths we can talk about. First is the dev side, which is I think what you're asking, and the other is the business side of that, like actually building things that make money or have some purpose beyond just your own automations. I think dev was what you're kind of talking about more. So on the dev side, what I would say is you don't have to know anything to use the platforms, because it's all very straightforward and configurable. And if you use the cloud version of N8N, for example, I have it running locally, but if you have the cloud version, you have their AI assistant inside that also pretty much will code pretty much anything you need. If there's something that you're trying to configure that's not working right as you connect nodes to each other, or you're asking nodes to do something, asking their AI assistant questions pretty much solves most of the drama. So it really is practically a no code solution, but I think low code is always a better way to frame this, because very simple idea. I think the most important thing anybody who wants to play with AI agents at this point should do is to take a Python course online and start to learn how to do some Python or some JavaScript, or well, really both, just to understand the logic of it, to understand how the things kind of work, so that I find that the LLMs are hallucinating a lot less when it comes to code. But I still went like a 15-minute fight last night with ChatGPT because it was telling me a bunch of bullshit about the thing I was asking it to do. And so I was like, fine, I'll ask Gemini, and
Yeah.
ask Gemini. And Gemini's like, no, ChatGPT's wrong. Here's the way to do it. And Gemini was right. And so, but it's only because I knew that ChatGPT was wrong. I just couldn't figure out how to get
Mm,
ChatGPT to give me the right answer, that I was able to take what Gemini gave me and use it. So
yes.
you don't have to be a dev at all, but the more, I mean, anybody can learn basic JavaScript and basic Python. They are super accessible. You don't have to become a developer in order to do that. But to whatever extent you can master those two languages, as far as you can take that down the road to become more of a developer, is just it's going to empower how you configure the agents behind the scenes and how you glue things together, because you're going to understand what the tool is trying to do for you, especially if you're using an AI assistant to configure stuff. Meaning, as you're doing the variables, if you're doing any logic, because you've got code blocks, if there's any kind of stuff there that you're doing in one of these agentic workflow platforms,
Mhm.
to where you're doing stuff that is code, it's probably JavaScript, could also be Python. Either one of those really matters. And the more you start to do this on your own with your own server or on your laptop and just running it locally or whatever, a lot of that's going to be Python. Either way, the logic of learning those two things will help a ton. That's what I'd say the most important thing is you do not have to be a dev in any accomplished way to do it okay. And the big point I think that matters with all of this, the solopreneur discussion especially, where it's really one person building something. But actually I take solopreneur and break the word a little, because there are very few, almost all the solopreneurs I know that have made more than 20 bucks in their pocket probably have have an assistant somewhere in Southeast Asia, or some people that they use on Fiverr or whatever. So I believe solopreneur is a bit of a misnomer anyways, but it does hold the concept together, as somebody who is probably one person leveraging other tools to get stuff done, whether that's other people, but not maybe employees directly, or other things. But I also extend that really to, I think the larger discussion is small team entrepreneurship, the ability for 3 to 8 people to do what it used to take 10, 50, 100, 200 people to do, even just last month or last year or a couple years ago. And that's creating incredibly interesting opportunities to build revenue generating companies uh, from the beginning, building micro SaaS,
Yeah.
building things that do one thing well or okayish, and be able to monetize that through community. And I think that's a really powerful opportunity that Agentic is doing. And to do that well, you can be a non-technical, entrepreneur and have an idea and build with all the low-code tools. But I really encourage people to go down the rabbit hole a little bit to become a bit of a JavaScript and Python um, capable person, because that just empowers everything you're going to want to build.
No, makes sense. And Ethan, we're almost here on time. We have another 2 minutes plus maybe kind of a couple. But I want to ask you, so what's happening? Like, where is the space going, right? Like, obviously, like I mean, Y Incubator also like mentioned that was that 80% of the portfolio company had something like 90% of AI generated code. Solo entrepreneur batches are also like coming up. So there is, I think, a lot of powerful ways where kind of like the space is going. But what is your thinking around kind of more, from workflow to agentic economies? Where are things actually like going? Where do you envision, like even I would say even in 6 to 8 months, because the space is moving so fast right now.
Mm. I think a lot of the trainings, or a lot of the private speaking that I do, that's not the public stuff. That the public stuff gets me the private stuff. So the private stuff is a lot of big companies, enterprise, corporate type things that their teams are wanting to now figure out how to to augment processes using workflows. So that's a big discussion. Every big company out there, not just tech companies, are having these conversations. And so I think that's just going to continue moving really forward. And I think so from a solopreneur, small team entrepreneurship perspective, the ability to build stuff for that crowd is super interesting because they've got tons of stuff that there are. I'm curious what the number of the percentage of employees in big companies is that basically do one or two things every day just over and over again, and all of those jobs are toast um, because of AI, because it's not efficient. And eventually somebody's going to build an agent that does that stuff, especially if there's no creative or analytical thinking involved, and it's just repetitive business tasks, moving data around, putting things together, putting this thing from over here, creating content from, you get a report, you have to make a PowerPoint from it. I mean, half the consultants at McKinsey are agents at this point, because that's all they've ever been. They're processing information and they're producing deliverables from that. I think that's a huge opportunity for people who understand certain things. So not really understanding, it's not really about becoming an expert about the AI or about other things, but becoming an expert at something else. So maybe you really know everything there is to know about how dentist offices work. Well, then go solve all of the problems they have that their crappy enterprise software doesn't solve for them or doesn't solve well. Build those things one by one, and they'll pay you $10 a month, $20 a month for amazingly simple things that solve their problems and create efficiencies for them. That's a huge opportunity for anybody who's entrepreneurial in spirit but can't develop, or more importantly, for so many developers who've never felt like they were capable of being entrepreneurs because they didn't really master maybe the marketing or sales or other stuff. It didn't interest them or whatever. Both sides of that can agent the other piece that they don't want to do. And that is what gets really interesting. The ability to solve so many problems. And so creating revenue generating, really interesting. The premise of the book is this idea that agentic and generative AI plus low code plus the creator economy unlock all of this. And the creator economy, what I mean by that is, in a world of 8 billion people, if you find 1,000, this is the model for YouTube, for Substack, for podcasts, for all this. In a world of 8 billion people, if you find 1,000 people who love what you've built enough to give you $5 a month, that's $60,000 a year. You find 2,000 people, or you charge $10 a month, now you're at 120K. We're not talking about making $500 million like Mr. Beast or any of those kind of things. This is about creating actual revenue in a very interesting, scalable thing that is important for people. Like most people are probably in a if they'd be really happy to have something 60K to 100K replace their day job, and that's completely doable. Whether or not it's long-term doable, I don't know, but that's another podcast for when AI and humanoid robots take over all the jobs. But the reality is, for the next 2 to 3 years, there is not only medium-sized middle-class revenue to create using these things, there is realistic generational wealth to be made. And it's not monkey JPEGs, it's not shitty meme coins, it's not stuff that has no actual real opportunity for most people, because most of them are the exit liquidity for the people really doing the stuff well. These are actual ways to solve problems and make money from them as an entrepreneur. And that is super interesting. And we've got a 2 to 3, maybe 5-year window where this is really doable before, and maybe even faster, before the AI tools become so powerful that it'll be really hard. And so the last thing I would say with all of that is that because development has become a commodity at this point, except for CTO, senior dev type people, basic regular dev is doable by anyone. Maybe not super scalable, maybe not the best quality, but and so I don't want to insult devs by that, but I've also met enough devs who don't do great work to know that AI has reached their level. That's for sure.
Good
And
point.
so
Yeah.
that is a big risk that we are looking at over the next bit. So the real moat for people is community and the ability to have any kind of distribution, meaning that last example. So then Eventbrite has existed for years. They cut off the free thing, and so Luma showed up and completely ate their whole thing because people needed a free solution, but also the technology hasn't really evolved a lot necessarily with Eventbrite's platform. And so things like whether or not there's having NFT tickets or having simple things like being able to whenever you have an event, ask for people's Ethereum or Solana address because you want to airdrop them, just little things like that. But in any case, Luma completely ate their lunch. Today, you can take a screenshot of a Luma page, give it to Lovable, and in 15 minutes, Lovable will give you a complete Luma website that works. But you know what you won't do? You won't take on Luma because you don't have the community and you don't have the distribution. So it is no longer a game about, unless you build community and distribution, in which case you can then go eat Luma's lunch. But the point is that it's not about the dev anymore. It's really about having community and having distribution. We're seeing lots of influencers or content creators raise venture capital because they're building things on top of their community. That's the future. But it doesn't have to be millions. This can be 1,000 people, can be 10,000 people, can be 100,000 people. And if that is a focused community and you build something that interests them, there's real opportunity here.
I mean, I really agree on what you say, Dayton, because I'm advocating a lot around, where we should position ourselves around, what is coming after you're on production, what is coming after MVP. Why copying kind of like business model is not sometimes working if you're just technical. And I think like what you're saying around first community, but I think also distribution capability is something that will be always more relevant, right? That even like not just I would say not even like VC, but also like users will be kind of like defining. I want to go with this product because there is reach, there is distribution. I know it's accessible, but and I think it's super important this part. Okay, sounds good. Ethan, I think like we need to kind of like I think like you could not really like close this up as good like with this kind of like final statement. I really like also what people are saying here in the chat. Well, thanks everyone all wants to build even more. I think also the lesson learned here is that building with MEP, even if you're a solo entrepreneur, I think surrounding yourself with kind of like workflows and automations, and in this kind of like agentic kind of reality is something that you need to do, but also focusing around the distribution. I think one thing is also important to think about also like networking as itself is becoming also more and more important because it's part of kind of the distribution strategy. And when you will start to see much more kind of like agents reaching out, I think what is more important is the relationship side. And I'm a big advocate because my basically like I'm a dev at profession, right? And developer relation is all about was really technical, but at the same time, the relationship now is getting more and more important. Sounds good, Ethan. Any closing word? Yeah, go for it.
That's a great point. The only thing I would underline is I also, even though community and distribution are the new moat, I don't want developers to think that they can't build things because they maybe are not overly social or interested in being comfortable because they like sometimes the personality for devs is they're quiet, they're introverted, they like to stay home and code and do their thing, and that's completely respectable. Agentic can be the piece that builds community and does a lot of that interaction. You don't necessarily have to go stand on stage and talk about your stuff or go to events and meet everyone. Obviously, that's another amazing way to build community and get a much bigger degree of distribution. But you can also just have social media accounts and create faceless content on YouTube or type all kinds of things on Twitter and Threads and whatever, and create lots of shorts and all that kind of stuff without ever having to meet another human being. So you can build community and build distribution, even if you're not somebody who wants to go do the social piece of that. I want to respect that because a lot of the devs that I love in my life do not go to events and they are not interested in that piece. So in the same way that this is opening up opportunities for non-developer entrepreneurs because they can do the dev side, I actually believe very much so that this opens up opportunity to be entrepreneurial and scale for developers because agents can do a lot of that community and other stuff. So yeah, I think that's the last thing I would just add to that. Feel free to go to the link that I posted when I retweeted this, or I'll post it as well, maybe under your post, for the pre-order of the book. That's always useful. I
Nice.
appreciate that a lot. Feel free to ask lots of questions. There'll be lots of free stuff coming at that list. So maybe the books too. So the sign up on that, and I'll keep you posted. But always happy to connect with people on any of the social networks. LinkedIn's the professional thing for me, but obviously, you have to be everywhere. So whichever one people prefer, feel free to send me a message, and I try to get through them.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ethan. Thank you so much, everyone, for actually listening to. We actually will share some of those links that you mentioned, and very excited. Actually, I think you're the first person in the live stream actually like really hands-on writing a book. So I think that's a shout out also like to you on doing that. We definitely need also like more overview and kind of like a high level overview, but in the same time, this overview need to come from people like actually in their hands-on. And I think you're actually not just writing a book, but you actually like using the tooling. So I think it's getting more and more important. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Also like to listening and engaging in the chat. We will send some links. And yeah, until that time, I will probably see you in some conference or online. Thank you so much,
Awesome.
Ethan. Thanks so
Thanks,
much
Francisco.
for listening
Yep.
up. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.